The little girl said, "Sir, my mom didn't come home last night," and the vampire king followed her. Towering spires rose like ancient fingers into the gray sky, their peaks swallowed by the mist. Lamps flickered weakly along narrow alleys, casting small circles of light that vanished almost as quickly as they appeared. In the heart of this shadowed city, the quiet was broken only by the faint echo of footsteps, small, hesitant, but determined. Ilara's boots clicked softly against the stones as she hurried along the deserted street. Her small hands clutched the hem of her coat, knuckles white with the tension of fear. She paused at a corner, glancing down an alley so dark it seemed to drink the very light around it. She shivered. "Mom, where are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The wind carried her words away, leaving only a hollow echo in return. Her mother had not come home last night, or the night before, and now no one in the household seemed to know where she was. Ilara had asked the neighbors, but their eyes had turned cold, their lips sealed with fear or indifference. No one wanted to speak of the strange disappearances that had been whispered about in hushed tones. Everyone seemed to feel it. Something dark was rising in the city, and only those brave enough to walk the streets alone would notice its presence. Ilara's heart thumped in her chest as she turned another corner, nearly colliding with the wall of a building. She pressed herself against it, catching her breath. The air smelled of damp stone and smoke from a distant chimney, and then she heard it, a soft rustle behind her, almost like the sigh of the wind, but more deliberate, more aware. "Ilara," a deep, smooth voice said. She froze. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The street was empty, save for the fog curling around the street lamps. A figure stepped out of the shadows. He was tall, so tall that the lamplight failed to touch his face completely. A long cloak swept around him like liquid night, and when he moved, the shadows seemed to cling to him. His eyes, however, gleamed with a strange light, like silver caught in the dark. "I am called Kale," he said, "and I believe I can help you find your mother." Ilara's instinct was to run, to scream, but something about him made her hesitate. There was a quiet authority in his voice, not threatening, yet impossible to ignore. She searched his face, looking for signs of deceit. There was none, only an air of timeless sorrow. "My mom, she's missing," Ilara said, her voice shaking. "Have you seen her?" Kale's lips pressed into a thin line. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he studied her as if weighing her courage against the danger that surrounded them. "Not yet," he finally said. "But I know where to start. You must trust me." Ilara hesitated. Trust was a foreign concept in this city now, where even neighbors avoided speaking aloud. But something in the calm of his presence called to her. "Okay," she whispered. Kale nodded once and gestured for her to follow. His cloak swirled around him as he walked, and the shadows seemed to lean back to make way for him. Ilara hurried to keep up, feeling the tension in her chest loosen slightly, replaced by a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in days. They walked in silence, passing narrow streets and silent marketplaces. The city was like a ghost, shuttered windows and empty doorways lining the alleys. The fog thickened as they moved, curling around them like fingers reaching for warmth. It was then that Kale spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "Your mother, she is tied to something much older than this city," he said. "Something that cannot be seen by ordinary eyes." Ilara stopped. "What do you mean?" she asked, her curiosity stronger than her fear. Kale glanced down at her, his gaze piercing but gentle. "There are forces in this world that live in the spaces between shadow and light. They are not cruel, not exactly, but they are relentless. Your mother, she has crossed one of those lines." Ilara's stomach knotted. "Crossed? What do you mean? Is she in danger?" Kale's eyes darkened for a moment. "Perhaps, but I will not allow harm to come to you." The words were a balm to her frayed nerves, and she felt the first warmth of hope since her mother vanished. She took a deep breath and followed him more willingly, though the fog seemed to thicken, pressing against them like a living thing. Eventually, they reached the ruins of an old palace at the edge of the city. Its tall, broken arches rose against the night sky, and the wind whispered through empty windows as if speaking to the past. Kale paused at the entrance, looking back at Alara. "This is where we begin," he said. Alara stepped forward cautiously. The palace was cold and silent, the stones slick with moss and age. Shadows pooled in corners, moving as if alive. Despite the chill, she felt safer with Kale nearby, though a shiver ran down her spine as the darkness seemed to watch her every move. Kale led her into a large hall where moonlight poured through a fractured ceiling. Dust swirled in the beams, creating patterns that danced on the floor. He stopped in the center and turned to her. "You must understand," he said. "The world you know is only part of the truth. There are things older than kings and queens, older than the stones we walk upon. Your mother, she has encountered one of these things, and it has marked her." Alara swallowed hard. "Marked, like a curse." Kale's lips pressed into a line. "Perhaps. But some marks are not chains, they are warnings. They show a path. And now you must walk that path with me." Alara's heart raced. She had always imagined adventures, but never like this. She had never imagined a world so vast, so full of shadow and mystery. Yet in the midst of fear, she felt a strange excitement. She was no longer alone in her search. They moved deeper into the ruins, passing corridors where moonlight fractured through broken windows, illuminating the remnants of a once grand palace. Statues of forgotten kings and queens gazed down from niches, their faces worn smooth by time. The silence was heavy, broken only by the echo of their footsteps. At last, they reached a smaller chamber, hidden behind a collapsed wall. The floor was uneven, and the air smelled faintly of something old and sweet, like dried flowers left too long in the sun. Kale knelt down and brushed his hand across the floor, tracing symbols that had been etched centuries ago. "These symbols," he murmured, "are not merely decoration. They are a map of sorts. They can lead us to your mother if we follow them correctly." Alara crouched beside him, trying to understand. "Can I help?" she asked. Kale's eyes softened. "You are already helping, simply by being brave enough to follow." Her cheeks warmed. It was strange to be praised by someone so powerful, someone who seemed more like a figure from a legend than a man. But even as she felt a flicker of pride, a shadow of fear returned. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. Kale's gaze lingered on her, thoughtful and distant. "Because I have seen what fear does to a person, and I have lived long enough to know that even the smallest flicker of hope can ignite something beautiful." Alara didn't fully understand, but the words comforted her. She allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they could find her mother. The night wore on, and the ruins seemed to come alive with the whispers of the past. Statues, shadows, and broken pillars seemed to move at the edge of vision, as if the building itself were alive. Kale traced the symbols carefully, explaining their meaning to Alara in simple words. "See these lines," he said. "They are paths, and see the circle here. It is a door, not a door made of wood or stone, but a doorway between what is known and what is hidden. If we step through it carefully, we may find your mother." Alara's eyes widened. "A hidden doorway," Kale nodded. "Yes, but it is not without danger. The world behind it is not like ours. Time is different there. Shadows live there in a way we cannot imagine." Alara felt a thrill of fear and excitement. She nodded firmly. "I'm ready." Kale extended his hand. "Then take it. And whatever happens, remember this. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it." Alara's small hand slipped into his, and together they stepped toward the hidden doorway. The shadows seemed to stir around them, and a chill ran through the chamber. The air felt heavier, charged with the weight of things unseen. And then a whisper, soft and sibilant, echoed through the ruins. "Alara," she froze. Kale's grip tightened, steady and reassuring. The voice came again, clearer this time, closer. "Alara, come to me." Alara's heart pounded in her chest. She glanced at Kale, whose expression had grown grim. "That voice," he murmured. "It is not your mother, but it knows her, and it knows us." Ilara swallowed hard. Her mother's fate seemed closer now, but the shadows promised that the path would not be easy. And in the moonlight, she realized that she had already stepped into a world where nothing would ever be the same. Kale's eyes met hers, steady and certain. "Are you ready?" he asked. Ilara nodded, even though her fingers trembled in his grasp. She did not know what awaited them beyond the doorway. She only knew that she could not turn back. The shadows shifted around them. The ruined palace seemed to breathe. And in that moment, under the silver light of the moon, the journey began. The air beyond the doorway was colder, heavier, as if it carried the weight of 1,000 forgotten years. Ilara stepped forward cautiously, holding Kale's hand tightly. The darkness pressed close, yet there was something familiar in the faint glimmer of moonlight that filtered from cracks in the walls. The shadows here were different, they seemed aware, bending slightly when they moved, curling like living smoke along the edges of the broken stone floor. Kale's gaze was steady, his eyes scanning every corner, every whisper of movement. "Keep close," he said softly. "These halls are older than any building in the city. Magic lingers here and not all of it is kind." Ilara nodded, swallowing her fear. Her small hand felt tiny in his, yet the warmth of his presence offered a strange comfort. She looked around, noticing the faded murals on the walls, the painted figures of angels and kings, their colors dulled to gray with age. Some had faces scratched away, others had arms broken or missing. There was a sorrow in their silent expressions, a story of forgotten glory and loss. "This place," Ilara whispered, "it feels alive." Kale's lips curved slightly. "Alive, yes, but not as we are. It remembers, it watches, it waits." They moved deeper into the ruins, their footsteps echoing softly. The hallways twisted and turned like the roots of a tree, growing into shapes that made no sense to the eye. Some corridors ended in walls, others opened into large chambers with ceilings so high they vanished into shadow. The air smelled faintly of earth and rain, mixed with something older, sweeter, like a memory. After a time, they reached a room that had once been a grand library. The shelves were broken and scattered, books lying open on the floor, their pages yellowed and brittle. Kale knelt beside one, brushing dust away with a gloved hand. Strange symbols shimmered faintly on the pages as if they had been waiting for him. "These books are not ordinary," he said, his voice low. "They hold knowledge that cannot be spoken aloud. They are records of the city before the city, of kings who ruled before men, and of creatures that lived in shadow long before humans walked the earth." Ilara crouched beside him, peering at the strange markings. Do they know where my mom is?" Kale's gaze softened. "Perhaps, but the answers are never simple. Knowledge here comes with a cost. Sometimes it tests the heart rather than the mind." Ilara felt a chill creep over her, not from the cold but from the weight of his words. She had always thought finding her mother would be simple: ask, search, and bring her home. Now she realized that the path was filled with riddles, shadows, and forces beyond her understanding. Yet she did not shrink back. She had already stepped into this world and there was no turning back. Kale rose slowly, his cloak sweeping the floor. "We should move," he said. "The path grows narrower ahead and the shadows here, they are not patient." Ilara followed him through the winding corridors, her heart pounding. She noticed something strange. The deeper they went, the more she felt that the walls themselves were aware of their presence. Shadows shifted in subtle ways, forming shapes that seemed almost human. For a moment she thought she saw faces peering at her from the darkness, only to vanish when she blinked. Do the shadows follow us?" she asked in a whisper. Kale's expression remained calm, but his eyes held a hint of something distant, almost sorrowful. "They are not our enemies," he said, "but they are curious. They remember everything and they test those who walk among them. Fear can give them power, courage can make them step aside." Ilara took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She thought of her mother alone somewhere in the darkness. She could not let fear rule her. I'm not afraid, she said quietly, though her hands trembled slightly. Kale's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. Good, he said. Then we are ready for the next step. They reached a chamber unlike any they had passed before. The ceiling arched high above, broken in places to allow streams of moonlight to fall like silver rivers onto the cracked marble floor. In the center of the room was a pool of still water, black and reflective, as though it were a fragment of the night sky captured in stone. Kale stopped at the edge of the pool, staring into its depths. This is a mirror of sorts, he said. It shows not what is, but what could be and what has been. If your mother has been touched by the shadows, this water may reveal her path. Alara leaned forward, peering into the black water. At first, she saw only her own reflection, pale and small beneath the moonlight. Then slowly shapes began to emerge, faint, wavering figures moving within the depths. One figure was tall and shadowed, moving with a quiet grace. Another seemed smaller, lost, calling out silently for someone. That's her, Alara whispered, pointing. Kale studied the reflections carefully. Yes, I see her, he said. She is close, but not here. The shadows have taken her through the paths we cannot walk with our bodies. Only with courage, with trust, can we follow. Alara's stomach tightened. What do we do? Kale extended his hand, his expression serious. You have already taken the first step by following me. Now you must take the next step beyond the mirror. Alara looked at the water, hesitating. It seemed impossible. How could she step into the black depths without falling? But Kale's hand was warm and steady, holding hers like an anchor. Together, he said softly, I will not let you fall. She nodded and stepped forward. As her feet touched the surface, the water did not wet her. Instead, it seemed to ripple like silk, responding to her presence. Kale followed, and together they walked across the mirrored surface. The shadows beneath them moved, shifting and curling but never touching. It felt like walking on the edge of a dream, where reality was stretched and softened. On the other side, they emerged into a new space, a corridor lined with lightless arches. The walls pulsed faintly with a golden glow, and the air was thick with quiet energy. Alara noticed small motes of light floating like fireflies, illuminating the path ahead. Where are we? She asked, looking around in awe. Kale's eyes were steady. We are between worlds, he said, the place where the known ends and the unknown begins. This is where the shadows part for those who walk with courage, and this is where we will find your mother. Alara felt a mix of fear and excitement. She was still a small girl, yet she had stepped into a world that was vast, mysterious, and beautiful. She glanced at Kale, realizing how much he had guided her, protected her, and even given her hope when she had none. As they moved through the corridor, the floating lights pulsed gently, leading the way. Alara felt the shadows pressing close again, whispering, bending, testing her resolve. But Kale's presence was a shield, steady and unyielding. Almost there, he said quietly, not breaking his stride. But you must be ready. What awaits may not be what you expect. Sometimes, even the people we love can be changed by the shadows. Alara's stomach tightened. She thought of her mother, alone and possibly afraid, touched by forces she could not understand. But she also thought of the courage that had carried her this far. She would not falter now. Finally, they reached a chamber at the end of the corridor. Its ceiling arched so high it seemed to touch the stars. In the center, surrounded by a faint golden light, was a figure kneeling on the floor. Alara's heart leapt. "Mom!" she cried. The figure turned, revealing her mother's face, pale but calm. Her eyes were wide, reflecting a strange light as if she had seen things beyond the ordinary. She smiled faintly at Alara, a mixture of relief and caution. "Alara," her mother whispered, reaching out. Kale stepped back, his cloak brushing the floor. "She is safe," he said softly, though his eyes remained wary. "But she has been touched by the shadows. She is not entirely herself yet. That is why we must leave quickly before the darkness finds us again." Alara ran forward, embracing her mother tightly. "I thought I would never see you again," she said, tears streaming down her face. Her mother hugged her back, holding her as if to anchor her in reality. "I was lost, my love," she said softly. "But you are brave. I can see it in you." Cale watched them for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned, gesturing toward the corridor. "We must go. The path behind us will close soon, and we have no time to waste." Alara's mother nodded, taking her daughter's hand. Together, they followed Cale through the corridor, back across the mirrored surface, leaving the shadows and the unknown behind them. And yet, even as they emerged into the ruins once more, Alara felt a quiet tension lingering in the air, a whisper that told her their journey was only beginning, for the shadows had noticed them. And they would not forget. The morning fog hung low over the city, softening the jagged edges of the old towers and spires. Sunlight, weak and pale, struggled through the mist, scattering silver patterns across the cobblestones. Alara walked beside Cale, her mother's hand in hers, feeling the strange mixture of relief and lingering fear. The ruins behind them seemed almost dreamlike, as if they had never been real, yet the shadows whispered still, reminding them that the world beyond the city was far older and more mysterious than they had imagined. Cale's steps were quiet, deliberate, almost floating over the ground. His gaze swept across the streets, wary and protective. Even though the immediate danger had passed, he remained alert. He had lived through centuries of loss, betrayal, and dark encounters. Danger, he knew, never truly left a place, and some shadows waited patiently for the unwary. "Alara," Cale said softly, breaking the silence, "you have been very brave, more than most children your age." Alara glanced at him, cheeks flushed. I only wanted to find Mom," she admitted. Cale's lips pressed into a thin line. "Bravery is not only in action but in the heart. You carry more courage than you realize, and soon you may need it more than ever." Alara's mother, quiet beside them, squeezed her daughter's hand. She had seen Cale in ways Alara could not yet understand, a being both terrifying and noble, carrying centuries of sorrow and wisdom in his calm eyes. The trio left the ruins and moved toward the outskirts of the city, where the roads became less defined and the buildings gave way to open fields and tangled forests. The fog thinned slightly, revealing twisted trees that clawed at the sky with barren branches. The air smelled of damp earth and distant rain, rich with the scent of life hidden beneath decay. "This forest," Cale said, pausing at the edge of the trees, "is older than the city itself. It remembers every footstep, every breath, every sound that has ever passed through it. The shadows here are alive in a way you have not yet seen. We must tread carefully." Alara's mother nodded. "I feel it," she said softly. "There is something, watching, something that knows us." Alara shivered, but she gripped Cale's hand firmly. She had learned to trust him, though he remained a mystery. Something about him drew her attention constantly, a mixture of strength, sadness, and a careful restraint that hinted at the depth of his past. They moved into the forest, the trees closing around them like walls. Shadows shifted beneath the branches, forming patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Occasionally, a breeze stirred, carrying whispers that sounded like distant voices or memories of long-forgotten conversations. Alara felt her heart pound with both fear and fascination. Are the shadows dangerous?" she asked. Cale shook his head. "Not if you respect them. They test those who enter, seeing who is strong, who is true, who is brave. Some fail, yes, but courage like yours can pass the test." Alara walked on, determined, feeling the weight of his words. She thought of her mother, who had been touched by forces beyond understanding, and of the shadows that still lingered from the ruins. She could not allow fear to rule her. She would face whatever came, alongside Cale and her mother. The forest thickened as they moved deeper, and the light of the sky dimmed to a soft gray, filtered through the dense canopy. Strange flowers glimmered faintly in the gloom, petals like silver lanterns. Occasionally, small creatures with luminescent eyes watched from the shadows before darting away, leaving only their glowing tracks in the dark. Kale led them to a clearing where a faint stream flowed, its water smooth and dark as obsidian. He knelt at the edge and gazed into the depths. "This water, it is a threshold," he explained. "It shows fragments of what has passed and hints of what may come. Your mother's path is reflected here, but not clearly. We must walk carefully, step by step, and follow the signs." Alara knelt beside him, peering into the water. The surface shimmered with images, glimpses of her mother wandering through strange corridors, meeting figures that were not quite human, touching objects that pulsed with energy and light. One moment her mother appeared afraid, the next serene, as though she understood things beyond explanation. She is learning something," Alara whispered. Kale nodded. "Yes, but some of the knowledge she has gained is difficult, confusing. It may trouble her if she does not see it through. That is why we must guide her, protect her, and, if necessary, face the shadows ourselves." Alara shivered, feeling both the weight of responsibility and a growing sense of determination. She would not let her mother face this alone, and she was beginning to see something about Kale, a quiet strength that did not need to dominate but simply exist, steady and unwavering. They followed the path along the stream, stepping carefully on stones that seemed to float just above the water. Shadows shifted beneath the surface, forming shapes that were both familiar and strange. Alara felt as though she were walking through a dream, where reality bent and time flowed differently. Suddenly, the shadows thickened around them, coiling like ribbons of smoke. The air grew colder, heavier, and Alara could hear faint whispers calling her name. She squeezed Kale's hand, heart pounding. "They are testing us," Kale said quietly. "Do not falter. Do not let fear guide you." Alara took a deep breath, focusing on his words. She stepped forward, feeling the shadows shift and bend around her without touching. Her mother followed, guided by Kale's steady presence. The deeper they moved, the more the forest seemed to respond, not with malice but with quiet curiosity. After a long walk, they reached a small glade where the trees opened to the sky. Moonlight, pale and silver, illuminated the space, revealing an ancient stone altar in the center. Strange markings glimmered faintly on its surface, pulsating like a heartbeat. Kale approached the altar, his expression serious. "This is a place of reflection," he said. "It is where the shadows are strongest, but also where truth can be found. Your mother's journey led her here, and this is where we will confront what has changed her." Alara's mother stepped forward cautiously, hands trembling. I remember this place," she whispered. "It feels both familiar and strange," Kale nodded. "The shadows have touched you, yes, but they have not claimed you. You have learned much, and now you must share it with those you love." Alara stepped closer to her mother. "Mom, whatever it is, we'll face it together." Her mother's eyes filled with tears and she nodded. "Yes, together." Kale moved to the edge of the glade, watching the surrounding shadows. "I will guide and protect you," he said quietly. "But the strength must come from within. The shadows respond to courage, not fear. And the courage is yours, all of yours." Alara looked at him, feeling a strange warmth spread through her chest. There was more to Kale than the power and mystery he carried. Beneath it all was a careful care, a watchfulness that did not demand but offered protection and guidance. They gathered around the altar, and the shadows shifted once more. Faint whispers filled the air, not loud enough to frighten but insistent, echoing memories and warnings. Alara and her mother held hands, their connection a small shield of light in the darkened glade. Kale placed his hand lightly on the altar, and the markings pulsed brighter, responding to the presence of those who were courageous and true. Alara's mother knelt, touching the surface with trembling fingers. The shadows around them swirled and shifted, forming images of the past, choices made, paths taken, and moments of fear or hope. Each vision was a test, a reminder of what had been endured and what could yet be. Alara watched, feeling a mixture of awe and fear. She realized that courage was not just physical, it was the strength to face the unknown, to trust in those you love, and to move forward even when the path is unclear. Kale's voice broke the silence. "The shadows are not evil," he said softly. "They are a reflection of truth, of what lies within each of us. Fear makes them dangerous. Courage makes them guides." Alara nodded, understanding more than she had before. She could feel the connection between the shadows, her mother, and Kale. It was a web of trust, bravery, and unspoken bonds. And within that web, hope could grow. As the shadows began to settle, the glade filled with a quiet light. The figures of the past faded, leaving only the warmth of moonlight and the soft rustle of leaves. Alara's mother looked at her, eyes clear and steady. I understand now," she whispered. "The shadows, they are part of us, part of the journey, and we are stronger together." Kale smiled faintly, a rare expression of relief and pride. "Yes," he said, "together you are strong, and together you will face what comes next." Alara felt a surge of determination. The journey had tested her courage, her heart, and her trust. But she had grown stronger, and she knew that with Kale and her mother by her side, she could face anything the shadows might bring. And yet, even in that quiet moment, a subtle tension lingered. The shadows had receded for now, but Alara could feel their awareness, their watchful patience. The path ahead was not over. It would twist and turn, challenging hearts, testing bonds, and calling forth the courage hidden in the darkest places. Kale turned his gaze to the horizon, where the forest thickened and shadows deepened. "The journey continues," he said, voice low but certain, "and it will ask more of all of us. Are you ready?" Alara squeezed her mother's hand and looked up at Kale. "I'm ready," she said firmly, feeling the strength that had grown inside her. Kale's eyes softened. "Good, because the shadows will not wait, and neither will the truths they guard." With that, they moved forward together, stepping into the deeper forest, where light and shadow danced and the next chapter of their journey awaited. The shadows had not forgotten, and neither had the mysteries that lay beyond. The forest ahead was thick and shadowed, yet there was a strange calm to the air. Alara walked beside her mother, hand in hand, feeling the rhythm of their steps echo through the silent trees. Kale moved slightly ahead, a quiet presence of strength and vigilance, his eyes scanning the dense shadows that seemed to stir with secret life. The morning had turned pale and golden, but the deeper they walked, the more the sunlight seemed filtered through layers of history and magic. Every branch, every stone, seemed to hold a memory. The shadows that had once tested their courage now lingered like silent witnesses, curious and watchful. Alara glanced at her mother, who walked with a steadier pace than the day before. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" she asked gently. Her mother smiled faintly. "I feel different. The shadows have shown me things I could not understand before. I am still learning, but I feel stronger now, and having you with me, it helps." Alara nodded, warmth spreading through her chest. She realized that this journey had changed them both, not just by facing fear, but by discovering strength within themselves. And through it all, Kale had been their guide, protector, and companion, a being who seemed to carry centuries of sorrow yet moved with care rather than cruelty. Kale's voice broke the quiet. "We are close," he said softly. "The shadows here are restless. They guard something important. Whatever lies ahead, we must face it together." Alara tightened her grip on her mother's hand. "I'm ready," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. The path led them to a clearing unlike any they had seen. Ancient stones formed a circle in the center, etched with symbols that pulsed faintly like heartbeat lights. The air shimmered, as though the very space between the stones held its own magic. Shadows moved around the edges, whispering in voices that were almost like memories. "This is the place," Kale said, his tone low and serious. "The shadows here are not just tests, they are reflections of truth. We cannot move forward without confronting what lies within." Alara's mother stepped closer to the circle, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and caution. I feel it," she whispered. "They're waiting for us." Kale nodded. "Yes, but we are not alone. Courage, hope, and trust can guide us. Step carefully and face it together. Alara glanced at him. She could see the weight in his eyes, not just of centuries but of choices, of things he had done and could not undo. And yet there was care, and perhaps something more, something gentle and enduring hidden beneath the mystery. Together they stepped into the circle. The air seemed to hum, the ground beneath them vibrating with quiet energy. Shadows swirled around their feet, forming shapes that reflected their memories, fears, and hopes. Alara felt her heart pound, but she held her mother's hand and looked to Kale for guidance. "Do not be afraid of what you see," Kale said softly. "The shadows show what has been and what may be. Courage will guide us through." The shadows shifted, revealing a figure in the center, tall, dark, and shimmering with an energy that felt both familiar and strange. It was not Kale, nor her mother, but something that seemed a reflection of both their fears and the journey they had endured. The figure's presence was commanding yet not cruel. It radiated expectation as though testing the bonds between them. Alara stepped forward, heart steadying. "We are not afraid," she said, her voice small but strong. "We face this together." Her mother nodded. "Yes, together." Kale's hand brushed hers briefly, a silent reassurance. "Good," he said. "Now we must act with truth and courage, not force." The shadows shifted again, revealing scenes from the past, moments of fear, mistakes, and choices made under pressure. Alara saw herself at the ruins, searching for her mother. She saw Kale, watching her with quiet vigilance, guiding her through every step. And she saw her mother, touched by the unseen forces, yet holding fast to hope. The figure in the center extended its hand, and the air shimmered with energy. It did not speak, yet its presence demanded understanding. Alara felt the memories and emotions of the journey flow through her: fear, hope, love, and trust. She realized that the power of the shadows was not in harm but in reflection. They demanded recognition of truth and courage, not surrender. Kale stepped forward. "Face it with honesty," he said. "The shadows respond to sincerity. Do not hide what you feel." Alara took a deep breath. "I am afraid," she admitted, her voice clear. "But I love my mother and I trust Kale. I will not let fear control me." Her mother's eyes glistened. "And I trust you, Alara, and you, Kale. Together we can face this." The shadows paused, then began to shift, flowing around them like water. The figure in the center dissolved into the light, leaving only the pulse of energy from the circle. A sense of calm spread through the clearing, and the air seemed lighter, warmer, as though a weight had been lifted. Kale lowered his hand from the symbols on the ground. "It is done," he said softly. "The shadows have accepted your courage. They have acknowledged the truth in your hearts. You have passed their test." Alara looked at her mother, who smiled with relief and wonder. We did it," she whispered. "Yes," Kale said, his gaze softening. "And in doing so, you have begun to heal not only yourselves, but the connection between this world and the shadows. Fear no longer guides you. Courage, love, and trust do." The sunlight grew stronger, piercing the canopy above, scattering golden rays through the clearing. The shadows that had once seemed alive now lay still, their whispers softened to gentle murmurs. Alara felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that the journey had not ended in danger, but in understanding and strength. Her mother reached for her hand. "Alara, I feel like I understand things I could not before. The shadows, they are not enemies. They are part of life, part of courage, part of love." Alara smiled, her chest light with relief. "And we faced them together." Kale nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. "Yes. Together, and that is the greatest strength of all." For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, letting the sunlight warm their faces and the shadows rest. The forest seemed alive but benevolent, as if acknowledging the courage and unity that had passed through it. "Alara," Kale said after a moment, his voice low but steady, "you have grown much on this journey. Fear, courage, love, trust, these are the threads that shape destiny. You understand now that even in darkness there is light." Alara nodded. "Yes." And I understand that some darkness is not meant to hurt us, but to guide us. Kale's eyes softened, his gaze lingering on her in a way that felt protective yet unspoken. And the heart that walks with courage and compassion can find redemption, even in the shadows of 1,000 years. Alara looked at him, sensing the weight of centuries in his words, and yet the care beneath them. He had walked through shadows of his own, yet he guided them with quiet wisdom, teaching her and her mother how to face fear, how to trust, and how to love without losing oneself. Her mother placed a hand on Kale's shoulder. "Thank you for guiding us," she said, "for showing us that even the darkest paths can lead to understanding." Kale inclined his head, a gesture both humble and regal. "It was not guidance alone. Courage and love guided the way. I merely walked beside you." Alara felt a warmth in her chest, a bond that transcended words. She realized that some connections could not be named, only felt, silent yet profound, shaped by trust and shared trials. The forest around them seemed to sigh in contentment. The shadows no longer whispered threats but soft echoes of past lessons and new beginnings. The clearing glowed faintly, as though blessing them for their courage and unity. "Alara," Kale said, his voice barely above a whisper, "the journey does not end here. Shadows will always exist and challenges will come, but now you know that love, courage, and trust can guide you through anything." Alara nodded firmly, feeling the strength that had grown inside her. "I understand, and I will remember." Her mother smiled, brushing hair from Alara's face. "And we will face everything together." Kale stepped back, allowing them a moment of quiet peace. The sunlight grew stronger, scattering through the trees and chasing away the lingering mist. Alara felt the bond between them deepen, not just of trust and guidance, but of understanding and shared journey. The shadows had tested them, but they had emerged stronger, connected, and more aware of the power within themselves and each other. As they prepared to leave the glade, Alara glanced at Kale. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. Kale's expression was steady, almost solemn, yet touched with warmth. "You did not need my thanks," he said. "You have already given courage and hope more than I could ever ask for." Alara felt the quiet truth of his words. The journey had changed them all, not only by facing darkness, but by discovering the light within hearts brave enough to act with love and trust. And though the shadows would always linger, waiting, watching, Alara knew they were no longer something to fear. They were part of the world, part of life, and part of the courage that could carry one through even the deepest darkness. The trio left the glade, stepping into the golden sunlight, leaving behind the circle of stones, the echoes of whispers, and the shadows that had tested them. Yet the memory of their journey remained, etched in their hearts like a quiet promise, that courage, love, and trust could illuminate even the darkest paths. And somewhere in the distance, Kale's eyes lingered on the forest, watchful and patient. Not as a predator, but as a guardian, a being who had walked centuries of shadow and found redemption not in power, but in the courage of hearts brave enough to trust, to love, and to face the unknown together. The shadows had not vanished, but they had been understood. And that understanding had transformed not only the forest, not only the trials, but the hearts of those who walked through it. Alara, her mother, and Kale moved forward together into the promise of a new day, where light and shadow danced in quiet balance, and courage had forged a path through the darkest of nights.